So let's just go ahead and get started. So the focus of this is payroll with CIS included as well. So on my agent dashboard, all I'm going to do is select my 6 RTIs to then drill down to my payroll clients. And I'm going to drill down into one of these to go to the payroll profile to begin running the payroll. So starting from scratch, the first thing that you would need to do when you're setting up the payroll profile is to go through your edit company section, and you can populate all of the information in relation to your client. So their company details, you can upload a logo, and that logo would appear on the green template of our Payslips in the top right-hand corner. So you can do your practices logo if you wanted to put your brand on it to get your brand out to more people, so that all of the employees of that company would see that it's your practice running that payroll. And inadvertently, if they're ever asked that, hey, who does the payroll for the business you work for, they would then be able to refer you to other people as well. And it's just naturally getting your brand out there to different businesses. Alternatively, you could charge extra to put your client's logo onto the payslips, or you could just do it free. Then we've got the contact details. So these contact details would act as the contacts for the company. So they would receive the payroll summary if you select to send them the payroll summary. And you can also send them all of the pay slips. You can have multiple contacts here. So if there were people that were doing different roles, you can add an entire list. And then we've got payroll details. So this is where you begin adding your statutory information. So the payroll registration date, BOE reference number, the accounts office number. And we have a few different options here as to functionality in the Nomisma platform. So the closed POE scheme, if you actually use that and follow the process, it will actually submit a POE closure notice to HMRC so to close the scheme. So you don't have to go onto the portal or follow the usual process of closing a scheme. You can do it all through the system. The bookkeeping links will actually allow you to determine what bookkeeping profile the payroll should be linked with. So by default, if you set the client up, then the bookkeeping will be linked automatically. However, if you didn't want a link, you could select blank, and then it wouldn't post the journal to bookkeeping. Or you can select a different company if you wanted to. And then you can also decide what nominal codes each of the employees should be linked with if you wanted to post them in different codes. So in this example, I haven't got anything there, but let's do that. There you go. So it will show you a list of all of the directors and the employees that have been set up, and then you can map it to the directors in that company. And you would also be able to select the expense type that it should be categorized to on the bookkeeping. And then P11D, you are able to submit P11Ds through the Nomisma platform. So if I enable that, within each individual employee profile now, I'll be able to store all of their payroll benefits in kind in order to submit a P11D at the end of each year. The payment management now, I'm not able to enable that just because I've already ran some payroll, but I will go undo all of the payrolls that I've already ran, enable this to show you how it works. But essentially, it allows you to determine exactly how much has been paid in relation to all of the payroll submissions, rather than Nomisma just marking every single payroll submission as fully paid, so that you can do the payment reconciliation within the tax payment section on the left menu. And then register for CIS. So if you select yes, then it will prompt you to select which CIS profile in the Nomisma this client relates to, so that it will create the link. And then by creating that link, any CIS submissions made for subcontractors will then be populated within Nomisma's payroll and it will be added to all of the reports so that the amount payable shown to your client will be correct, including POE and CIS. So if I save that now, and then moving on to the next section here, we've got payroll settings. So for the company pension, I'll just select yes to set that up. And now I have the option of pension details. So here you can enter all of their pension information. And by doing this, it will add a pension dashboard on the left menu. So let's just enter all of this details. Save that. So now I've saved that and I've got some basic information in relation to that pension. On the left menu, I now have the pension dashboard. So I'll come back to that shortly, but that just allows you to submit pensions directly to Smart, Nest, Legal and General, Aviva, and a couple of other pension providers as well. Okay, so going back to payroll details, within payroll settings still, the next section we have is frequency. So if your client does have more than one payroll frequency, then you can add an additional one. And by doing so, you can select weekly, annually, fortnightly, four-weekly, and then you'll be able to select the date that that payroll should be ran. So you can have all of them if you wish, or you can just have one. And then the next one we have is this automatic payroll. So what this is Nomisma will automatically file the payroll to HMRC. It will send the payslip to the employees. It will also send the employer summary to the main contact if you want it to, and it will post the journal to the bookkeeping by enabling this. So the most useful scenario for this feature is director-only payroll submissions. So where you set them up with a national insurance threshold, it doesn't really change month on month or week to week. And then Nomisma will just file it for you. And then at the year end, you can then just do the final few tasks before setting up the next year, which will then run itself and file everything for you again. So that is a really useful feature. If I just disable this or sorry. If I disable this and then go through the process of enabling it, you'll see exactly how to do so. So it's just giving me a message that tells me exactly what this feature is going to do. So by enabling this, your payroll will automatically be filed with HMRC and payslips will be sent to the employer or employees. So if I now continue, we've got the option of how should the payslips be sent. So should they be emailed to the main contact? Should they be emailed to the employees, or just don't send them at all? So I'll select don't send, because at the moment I already get hundreds of emails every month in relation to payslips from fake companies. So should an employer's summary be emailed to the main contact? So you can select yes or no. At this point, you may recall that in the main contact, we haven't added one yet. So it's just warning me to state that the main contact does not have a valid email address. So again, I'm going to select no and then continue. So that's just giving me an overview. And at that point, I can then enable that. And by enabling it, every time the payroll gets to the next payroll run date, then Nomisma will trigger and run that payroll for you. And then here we've got the Payslip template. So this is literally just the color of the payslip that would be generated by Nomisma. It's also the styling, so that would all be down to your preference. Display leave on payslip will show all of the annual leave that the employee is entitled to on their payslips. So if you don't want to have that enabled, or if you're not calculating that annual leave, I would highly recommend leaving that enabled. However, disabled. However, You can also keep track of all of the employees' annual leave through the Nomisma platform, and I'll show you that as well. And then finally, we've got the password protection. So this will mean that every single PDF or every single zip file that you send from the platform will be password protected. And in the email that is sent, it will explain how the password is calculated. So it may be the last four numbers of their national insurance number, and the employee will be notified of that, and they'll be able to calculate it themselves to access the payslip. And then the next step we've got is the allowances and schemes. So this is where you can claim for employment allowance, your quarterly payment scheme, if you're eligible, you've got your small employers relief, and then finally the apprenticeship levy. Pension details we've already entered, so I'm not going to go through that again, but just so you can see it. And then finally here, we've got general terms. So the first step is your bank details, or your client's bank details. And the reason why we've done this is that if you have any extremely large payrolls that you're running, for example, we have a client that is doing a payroll in excess of 500 employees on Nomisma, then you can enter the bank details for the company and you can enter the bank details for every employee. And what that will do is it will put the bank details together, the account number and sort codes, so that, and as well as the payment that the employee is owed, and it will create a BACS file that can then be uploaded to the company bank account, which will go through and process every single payment for you rather than it being done manually. So that can save a lot of time in terms of processing these payments directly to the bank. And then the next section we've got is common contractual terms. So here, this is where you can begin keeping track and telling Nomisma how to calculate their annual leave. So we've got leave year start, the leave days that the employee is entitled to. So by default, it's 28, but you could have 32 or 40 if that is what the company policy is. The holiday pay rate percentage is normally 12.07%, and that's really useful for calculating anyone that is on a 0-hour contract or works part-time, so that at 12.07% of every hour they work will be put aside as annual leave entitlement, and Nomisma will keep track of that and do that calculation for you. Then we've got the max carryover. So in this section, based on the leave year start date, their leave entitlement, and how much leave they've taken, at the end of their leave year, the maximum carryover could be 3. So it will remove any leave that they haven't taken, reduce it to 3, and then take that leave to the next period. And then the cutoff date is in relation to the max carryover. So it's the cutoff date of that annual leave. What is the latest date that they could take it? And then weekly working hours. So this is the standard working week within the organization, and it will be populated automatically onto every employee's profile, which can then be edited if each individual employee has different terms. We've got the max sick days. What is their notice period? Do they pay overtime? And does the leave, do they get extra leave entitlement when they do overtime? What is the company policy for retirement age of male members of staff and female members of staff? And then we've got pension scheme. And finally, the normal working days. So the pension scheme is, does all of the employees get enrolled into the pension scheme by default? That's because pre-auto enrollment, it was like that. But sooner or later, that field will actually be discontinued. But the normal working days, so this just applies it by default to all employee profiles, and then you can change it on their records. So I won't save that, but now if we go back to the payroll dashboard, so once you've entered all of that information, Nomisma's pretty much set up, ready to be run to run payroll. And you can begin going through and adding new employees, but rather than adding a new employee, all I'll do is edit an existing employee and show you exactly what that looks like and how that side of things works. So within the employee details, we've got all of their personal information here. So I'm not going to go through that in too much detail, but you can see that there. And then we've got their mandatory payroll information. So tying this back to the company setup where we have the bank details, then this is where you can enter the employee's bank details in order to generate that BACS file. Okay. And then we've got the tax code, were they a company director, what is their national insurance calculation method, and starter declaration, as well as a few other fields as well. Okay. And then we've got pay details. So within the pay details, you can actually set up every single employee with their own portal login. And this portal login will also double up as access to our mobile application. So that is included within every package, free of charge. There's no extra charge for that. So all of your clients' employees can actually go onto the Google Play App Store or the Apple App Store, download the Nomisma payroll app, and they will be able to log into it using this username and the password that they're given. So by doing that, they can access payslips. They can also view all of their annual leave taken. And very soon they will also be able to submit timesheets. So that is one of the elements that we're working on next in the Nomisma payroll side of things. And the timesheets will then feed through to the web application and populate employee profiles with the number of hours that they've submitted. But there will also be an approval process that the employer will need to sign off on those hours, so that once they sign off, they'll get populated onto the payroll, ready for you to review it. So rather than having to send a spreadsheet or gather the information in some way, shape or form, it can be done through these mobile apps. There will also be the ability to do it through the web application. If an employee doesn't have a smartphone, then they'll just be able to go to Nomisma and log in like you would. Okay, so here we've got the how many hours are worked each week. So that's really useful if you are doing a calculation for how is their pay worked out. So for example, if it's an hourly rate, then it would calculate the hourly rate times the number of hours to get to their salary. But if I change this salary now and just put in 95,000, then the monthly salary, the weekly rate, the day rate, and the hourly rate are all automatically populated, so that when you're running the payroll, you can use each of these as items to add additional pay to their pay packet if needs be. There is a question that has just come in. So is there the ability to send payslips via email? Yeah, there is. So as long as you've set up your own emails within the system, within the agent screens, then you will be able to send emails from the system, and that will be through the run payroll process. So I'll show you exactly how that works shortly. But here you can see the monthly salary, weekly rate, day rate, hourly rate are all calculated. So that is really rather useful. You can keep track of their apprenticeship start date, what student loan they have, and leaving date if they are leaving. So some of these fields actually combine elements of HR with payroll. So when we went through the edit company section, for example, all of the company terms and the contractual terms do tie in with certain HR elements. So that is why some of our advisors are finding it really useful to give their client access to the payroll module as well, because they can update certain fields if you want them to. So within the expenses and benefits section, this may be new to many of you if you haven't seen it already, but the reason why this is appearing is due to the fact that I enabled P11D in the edit company section. So now I'm able to enter all of their benefits in kind. So we've got cars here, make and model, the registration number, and by entering all of these fields, then Nomisma will be able to use that information to calculate what the benefit in kind should be. And then we've got our loans, so low interest loan 1 and low interest loan 2. And we've got other expenses as well. So absolutely every box on the P11D can be populated, and you can enter it all here. Okay. And then moving on, we've got auto enrollment. So here, this is the individual employee's profile for pensions. So you can enter their information, and then their payroll will be automatically calculated. So if I just go through the process of doing this now, I'll come back to this because I haven't actually set up a pension yet. But I'll set up a pension, then I'll come back to this employee profile, and I'll show you how the calculation is done. And then we've got general terms. So here we've got our employment terms, which are brought through from the edit company section. And at the bottom, we've got their annual leave schedule. So based on all of the information entered above, then the annual leave will be calculated. And you can view how much annual leave they're entitled to at any point in time once that's up and running. And then finally, we've got the emergency contacts. So again, tying in with HR, this is more useful if your client is using it as a way of keeping track of certain information. But if you wanted to add certain elements of HR to your offering, then what a few of our advisors are doing is that they're actually adding in this sort of information and offering it as a service to their client. But obviously, it's not something everyone wants to do. Okay. So moving on then to the pension dashboard. Within here, you can connect Nomisma to the pension provider of the client. So if I select add scheme, you can either add it manually, create new, which will actually create a new pension scheme with Nest or Smart or a few other pension providers, or you can link existing. So if I click on link existing, it will select what is the destination ID. So what pension provider am I using? So I could select Nest and then authorize. This isn't going to work. So I haven't got a valid ID. So that is the reason why it's not working for me. But in your scenario, you should be able to go through that process, and it will take you to a portal where you can then finalize everything and log into Nest and connect it to Nomisma. And by doing that, it will pull through all of the pension information, store it into Nomisma, and it will then allow you to submit directly to the pension provider. So if anyone needs any help with that to get that set up, then we do offer support. So you can get in touch with our support team via phone or email, and we can help you out with that. So what I'll do here is add a new scheme manually, and I'll just need to enter some basic information. So if we go Nest, calculation basis, qualifying earnings. So it's given me a warning there that says the scheme is not found for my employment number, but that's just because I made it up. And then we can go employee contribution free, employers. Yeah. And then save that. So now I have a scheme. If I wanted to, I could go in and view schemes, and then it will show me that scheme. So if I wanted to edit it, I can, and you can make all of the adjustments you need to. But within this screen itself, you'll notice it says no records found. And that's because this is actually a list of all of the employees that have been enrolled into a pension scheme. So it's like the payroll dashboard, but specifically for pensions. So as I add an employee here, they will appear. So Now that I've got a scheme, if I go back to the payroll dashboard and edit, so all of these employees now have 0 for pension. But if I edit this employee, go to auto enrollment, and then add them to my testing scheme. So you can have multiple pension schemes in this as well if the employer had them. But let's just enter the enrollment date. And then save that. So now when we go back to the payroll dashboard, the pension calculations are now done automatically for that employee. And when I go to the pension dashboard, then I've got that employee listed there, and I can see a little bit more information about that employee. So I can see what method is being used on that pension scheme, what their pensionable pay is, the employee percentage, the employer percentage, and then the amounts. So the reason why we've done that is to make it so that you don't have to do the separate calculation to check that it is correct. You can have all of the information in relation to pensions specifically on one page, so that if you do have 4, 5, 6, 7 pension schemes, you'll be able to see a list of all of the employees, what the method is to calculate their pension, and roughly how it's been calculated, so that you can double check it if you wanted to. Okay, there is extra functionality on this as well. So, for example, you can assess employees, and you can go through the process of sending them auto enrollment letters. You can download the letters that Nomisma generates, so that if you wanted to, you can then take that, edit it, make it your own, and then send it to the employees if you offer that as a service. You can also send it to the employer as an alternative, but that is really rather useful as well. And through the pension side of things, you can also enroll employees into pensions. So if this employee hasn't been enrolled yet, I'll just go back to assess employees, but you've got this submit enrollment, which once you've connected the pension provider and linked it, any future employees that are added, you can do the enrollment through the platform as well. You won't have to leave it. So you can download the letters, do the enrollment, and submit the pensions directly to the pension provider. Now, I understand this is slightly more complicated area, so if anyone does need help getting that up and running, do let us know. So before we move on to actually running a payroll, we've got the tax payment section on the left menu. Oh, sorry, that is a question that has just come through. So is there a postponement of 3 months of pension auto enrollment for new employees? And that 3-month postponement period is optional. So you can postpone them if you wanted to, but you don't necessarily have to. It's entirely up to the way that you and the employer want to do it. But you can enter that postponement into the Nomisma. Yeah. So on the employee profile, if I go back to the payroll dashboard and select edit on this employee and go to their auto enrollment details, here we've got the postponement start date and the postponement end date. So you can keep track of it, and that will give you an alert in the system as well. Yeah, it's my pleasure. So moving on to the tax payment section, this is essentially, well, it is a P11. So you can see a list of all of the payrolls that have been ran. You can see all of the NI, employers NI, and all of the payments that are due to HMRC and how they're calculated. But this, if you enable tax payments in the edit company section, this is where you would then be able to enter the tax payments manually. So you can see here the balance due to HMRC is always 0 because I don't have it enabled. So Nomisma just marks every single month as paid automatically. However, if you want to do that manually so that it doesn't mark each month as paid, you can enable tax payments and then you can manage. You can enable payment management, and you can manage it all yourself. Okay. So in addition to that, if you wanted to make any adjustments to these, so if there were any manual adjustments HMRC's end, if there was any late payment interest, any penalties or charges that the client has to pay, you can make all of the adjustments using these buttons. So if I select HMRC adjustments, you can enter the adjustments that have been made, just so that you can reconcile this with exactly what HMRC have. And we've got the statutory pay funding if they receive maternity pay in advance, tax refunds, and CIS suffered. And that will also feed into the report that would update how much they need to pay. Okay, so one question has come through. Do the tax payments autofill through to the bookkeeping module? The tax payments don't autofill through to the bookkeeping module, no. Purely because within the bank feeds in bookkeeping, if you bookkeep it through the bank feed, then this could end up duplicating it. But I think it's a good question, because rather than sending the data to the bookkeeping, we could get the data from the bookkeeping and populate it into the payroll. So once you've marked all of the payments that have gone out of the bank to the wages, sorry, not wages, the POE and NI tax due code, then we could pull that through to payroll. So I'll make a note of that and we'll add it as a feature request. But that's certainly something we can do, and that will make your life easier. So yeah, very good question. Thank you. I hope that answers the question though. If not, then do let me know. So that is the tax payment section. You can also send an email. You can download this as a PDF. You can export it to a CSV. And then moving on, we've got filing management. So this is where you can see a list of all of your filings that are due to HMRC and the statuses of them. So if I click on the status here, I can see that this one has been failed, and it gives me the error message as to exactly what's gone wrong. So I've got the supplied user credentials are incorrect. And if you wanted to get the successful confirmation message, you can download that as a PDF. And if I click the pending, it will just show me a blank RTI submission report. Okay, so one additional question that's just come in is, will the employer's allowance be taken into account when submitting the journal to the bookkeeping package? The answer to that is yeah. It will. Once you run the payroll, it will calculate that there's no employment, there's no national insurance to pay, and it will post that to the bookkeeping module. It won't post the gross amount before the employment allowance. So yeah, Nomisma knows about that, and it calculates that for you. Okay. So one other really useful feature to know about on this page is the fact that you can select the FPS or the type column, and it will show you exactly what will be filed to HMRC. So if anyone is familiar with the files that HMRC use called XML files, then you can actually read this and you'll be able to see certain details about that submission. So I can see the tax office number, reference, and as you go through this, you can see exactly what is being submitted. And if you wanted to as well, you can select multiple payroll submissions and then go through the process of filing them in bulk. They submit to HMRC, or you can mark them as not to submit if you have already filed them through another software package, or if you're simply not filing them because your client hasn't paid. So one other question has just come in. So some of my clients want to submit payroll themselves. can they use their own HMRC login details to do submissions? The answer to that is yeah, they can. Within their bookkeeping profile, you can edit it and you can update their own credentials so that they can submit it themselves. But our recommendation is that the accountant and bookkeeper does it, because there are a lot of calculations on payroll that could go wrong if the individual doing it doesn't know much about it. But yeah, they would be able to. And if I go back to clients and select bookkeeping here and just search Barney's and edit that. So in the bottom right hand corner, you've got this HMRC sender ID and HMRC value. So the sender ID is essentially your government gateway username, and the value is your password. So if you enter that, then it will switch it from agent level to business level, and then they will be able to file the payroll. But businesses won't be able to file final accounts, and they won't be able to file self-assessments. And the reason for that is that we do recognize that it is just too complicated for them to do themselves. And we've made a commitment to accountants and bookkeepers not to sell software, accounts and taxation software to business owners, because we simply do not want to belittle the industry any more than it already has been. And we want to support our accountants and bookkeepers. So that is our commitment to all of our advisors, that we won't be doing that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. So after filing management, then we've got the leave management. So here you'll be able to see a list of all of the annual leave that has been added to the system, and you'll be able to see every single employee that has had annual leave. And in the future, we're planning to add an approval process for annual leave, so that through the mobile app, employees will be able to request it, and the employer will be able to approve or decline all of the annual leave requested. So that is coming in the future. I haven't got a date for that or a timeline for that at the moment, but that's the reason for this page, because we're beginning to plan for that and planning ahead. And then finally on the left menu, we've got our reports. So you can begin looking at the employees details list. You can generate P60s, P45s, and P11D forms, view all of the payslips that have been ran, and a few other reports as well. So you'll notice here that we've got the BACS payment upload file. So that's what we referred to earlier in terms of adding the company bank details and the employee bank details. So if I go into the payslips report, for example, we've got a list of all of the employees there, and you can switch the month, switch the tax year to be able to access previous ones. And going back as well, within the company side of things, we have this POE data provisioning service notices. So what this actually does is it will connect to HMRC, and it will allow you to download all of your P6 notices, your P9 notices, your student loans, and RTI notices. Now, this feature is very, very new. So we're just going through the process of improving it even further. But you can do this on a client level, or within the agent screens. We're planning to make it so that you can do it for all of your clients at once. So here we've got the data provisioning service in reports. And if you click on that, you will be able to see notices for all of your clients, and then you'll be able to apply the notices to each individual client and each individual employee record, which will then update their tax code. So yeah, the aim of that is just to save you a lot of time, because in the past, software that I've used, I've never used this sort of functionality, because the software I used in practice was slightly more out of date. But certainly from an agent perspective, I'm not aware of anyone that is allowing accountants and bookkeepers to apply all of the tax code notice changes to all of their clients at once. So we've got this up and running. This will work really, really well. So have a look and do give us some feedback on this. I know it's a little bit, there's some work going on with this at the moment, to be completely transparent. So if it doesn't pull through now, then do wait for a notification from me, and I will send a notification to everyone to say that it's now fully up and running. But that's why we haven't really announced it too loud at the moment. So in addition to the agent level, just before I move back to payroll, there are also a lot of reports here that you can run, which would be across all of your clients. So you can see all of your wages journals, your RTI submission reports, a payslip count report if you wanted to see how many payslips have been ran for every employee in every company. So if you wanted to do value-based pricing, you could use something like this to be able to charge on a per payslip basis. But yeah, I highly recommend exploring that in a little bit more detail. And if there are any reports that you think you would find useful, then do let us know as well, because we can build reports to speed up your processing time. Okay, so on the payroll side of things, we've pretty much covered most of the setup process, but now all that's left to do is select Run Payroll. And by doing so, it will take me to the screen where I can review this month's payroll prior to it being scheduled for submission with HMRC. So I can see all of the gross wages, the statutory pay, taxes, national insurance, and I can see year to date as well. Now, at this point, if you decided that you needed to add a bonus to one of the employees, you can select Edit on the right-hand side. And that will allow you to go into their profile in order to change their basic pay, or you can add an additional line item to their pay. So here we've got the unit type, which is hours and days, and that's calculated based on their basic salary. So if I wanted to add 10 extra days, I can do so here. And in addition to that, you can add any additions and deductions to this as separate line items on the payslip, which would be mapped to nominal codes within the bookkeeping. So I could charge them for materials and put that through as a £1,000 addition. And I could also put in a deduction for a loan and loan. So when you run this, those two line items will be added, and they are the nominal codes that they will be mapped to in the payroll journal that's posted to bookkeeping. So if I now add a comment, just say hello and save that. Now the gross wages have been updated, and all I'm going to do is run payroll, but you'll notice here as well that you can send the pay slips. So referencing back to the earlier question that was asked, can Nomisma send email to employees or employers? Then the answer is yes, you can send it to the employees, or you can send it to the main contact. So if you send it to employees, then it will distribute every payslip to every single individual employee. And it's alerting me here that this employee does not have an email address. So all of these employees won't receive payslips. So I'm just going to select Don't Send and then Run Payroll. So that just takes a few seconds to go through. It shouldn't take too long. And that finalizes the payroll. It will then put it into the filing management ready for filing, and it will generate all of the pay slips. So if I now go into that employee, I can see that payroll has now been finalized, and I can view the pay slip. So on this pay slip, I've got my basic pay, I've got my regular daily wages, and I've got my materials, which was the addition. And then on the right-hand side, we've got our income tax, national insurance, our loan deduction, and our employee pensions. So absolutely everything is populated for you, and you can see the net pay there. And then if I go back to the payroll dashboard, you can add you can view the journals that have been posted. So this journal on the 30th of September, I can preview that and it will show me all of the entries that have been made. So there's a couple of questions that come through. So is there annual pay total subcontractors report and also with monthly breakdown? Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure, but within the CIS module, there will be some reports that I can show you. Another question has come through. So please, can you show how to add deductions after tax? Yeah, sure. So if I go into this employee record, instead of running the payroll, I'm just going to this time select edit on a future payroll. So you can actually edit all of the payrolls in advance. So if you get told that an employee has a bonus in December, then you can go in, edit that, add the bonus. So you don't have to just remember about it all the time. But if we edit this and then add a deduction after tax, let's save that. So now if we go, I would have to run that to show you the payslip. If we go to payroll dashboard, run payroll, and then go into the employee profile, generate that payslip. So there you go. The tax calculation will be slightly different. So what I would recommend having a look at it and see exactly how the tax calculation works, because I would need to spend some time just to show exactly how that works. But that's how you would do it. So the last box you would just change from before tax to after tax. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question. My pleasure. So that is the payroll side of things. Before I move on with payroll, is there any other questions from anyone? Because we have the CIS to go through, but there's not too much to show in CIS, to be completely honest. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, I'll move on to CIS. And if there is anything that pops to mind, then feel free to put it in the Q&A section and I will answer it. Okay, great. So moving on then. So if I go back to the clients list and select the service CIS, I can then see I've got one client there that is a CIS client, and I can drill down into that and it will take me to a list of all of their subcontractors. And in addition to this, you can also get to it from their bookkeeping profile. So if I select bookkeeping and type in Mo's, so once you've linked the CIS to the bookkeeping, you'll see that the CIS comes as an option at the bottom of the left menu. So if I select that, it takes you to exactly the same page where you can see all of the subcontractors. And once you, or when you go through the process of adding a subcontractor in the top right-hand corner, you can add all of their details. And at the bottom, you can actually verify the subcontractor, which will check their details against HMRC, and it will pull through the deduction rate that needs to be deducted for CIS purposes. So 30%, 20%, or gross. And once you do that as well, they would then be listed as a subcontractor in your subcontractor list. And by drilling down into each one of these, you can then see all of the invoices that have been raised in relation to that subcontractor for each individual CIS period. And on the right-hand side, you can see what ones have been filed and what ones haven't been filed. And if you wanted to drill down into that period, you can click on the period column, and it will take you into a breakdown of all of the invoices that have been included on that submission. And if this hadn't been filed yet, you can also add new invoices to this as well. So at this point, you can edit it, delete it, preview it, just to see what that invoice is. But if we go back and select a different period, so this one, now this one hasn't been filed, so in the top right hand corner you have the option of adding a new invoice for that subcontractor, and then you can go through the process of adding this in, and the CIS will be calculated based on the entries you've made for labor, and you can add additions to that as well, which wouldn't be subject to CIS. So once you've added all of the invoices for them, you will be able to go through the process of filing that. So if I go back to May, add an invoice. Yeah. So the invoice total is for £8,000. Our CIS deductions are £3,000, and we can save that. Oh, okay, yeah, I have to change the date. So the CIS period is at the top there. So that invoice has been added. And once you've added that invoice, you can come back to CIS on the agent screens, and you've got your dashboard where you can see all of your contractors, the CIS periods that are due, and then you'll be able to go through the process of filing these CIS returns. So on the CIS filing section, you can see I've got Mo's Tavern, all of their submissions, and here we've got the invoice that I just raised for that date period. And once you're happy with that, you can select it and simply select File CIS. And then that submission will go to HMRC, and you'll get a submission report that tells you whether it's been approved or if it's failed. And at any time, if you wanted to see your submission reports, you can select CIS submission report in the left menu, and you can also see CIS failed report. But going back, on the left menu here, we've also got reports. So you can see payslips by contractor. So once you've actually filed the CIS return, you will be able to generate payslips. And you can also generate a few other reports as well. So all subcontractors' pay totals. You've got your payment certificates. So if I generate that as a PDF, there you go. And then going back to reports as well, we've got the CIS verification certificate, which shows that you have checked it with HMRC, and this is the verification that came back. And CIS submission reports and failed reports for this specific contractor. And then finally on the left menu, you've got import subcontractor. So here, if you have all of your subcontractors in a CSV file for that client, you can upload them in bulk to the system rather than adding them individually. Once you've uploaded them in bulk, you will also be able to edit their details. So in relation to this subcontractor, you can select edit, and you'll be able to go through and verify them again if you wanted to. So if you haven't verified any of them already, you can upload them and then verify them. Okay. So in terms of CIS, there's really not that much to it. It's more administrative work. However, if anyone has any questions, then please do let me know. And in relation to the question that came in about the annual pay total subcontractors report, I hope that's answered the question as well.